Oh, this is why.
What did you do wrong?
I had to shut WoW down. Shut up.
Oh, okay. Way to fail.
This is the second time we've done this. Chill.
Oh, Cat, make sure you talk over Mist because he won't shut up. Just throwing it out there.
Please do.
Because he won't shut up.
Shut up.
She's quiet, so...
We love each other so much.
It's a love-hate relationship. She's quiet,
I think it's a healer thing.
Probably.
So much.
I mean, most people
Are we
that
live
play
yet, or
healers
can
are
I
not.
still talk?
I have a thing. It looks like...
Yeah, we are live,
Bad
so-
echo.
Yep.
I had a Planet Side 2 shit thing jump up on me. Yeah, we're good. Go ahead and talk. Hello?
Okay, since apparently nobody else is going to do this, welcome
I
to
haven't paid
Out
attention.
of Mana. This is our second ever podcast, and we are running on a very tight schedule. My name is Mist. These are the rest of the people that you'll see on the screen. Tonight's topic is going to be hardcore raid progression from the point of view of a healer. We have two special guests with us today. We have Maladi from Blood Legion and Anjanas from Security. I'll start with Malady. If you feel like introducing yourself to anyone, go ahead. And then other person can go ahead as well. And then we can jump right into the questions.
Alright, I'm Malady. I've been healing for Blood Legion for a little over a year now. I did Dragon Soul and this last year with them. I play usually Priest or Monk. Not sure what else I should say here, so...
Speak for yourself. That's okay. Your reputation, whatnot. And Jonas, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kat. I play a Disc Priest main, a Disc Priest alt, and a Resto Shaman, and I'm in the EU Guild Security on Frostmain.
Hooray! Okay. Now that we have our guests out of the way, anyone have anything to say before we start asking questions?
And tweet us
Yep.
during the show at OOM Podcast. So we are watching. I am watching Twitter. So any questions? It's probably easier than the chat room.
Yeah. Don't mind Chris. He is currently dying. So if you can't understand him, we're watching our Twitter right now at OM Podcast. Just hashtag ask questions or just ask here. And then we will get right to it. So, this is something I kind of discussed with Malady prior to the show. And we decided that this whole topic would be just kind of discussing how we as progression raiders see healing and raiding in general. And there's one particular issue that tends to present itself all the time when it comes to class balance and progression rating in general. And that's generally the why do Blood Legion and Paragon and guilds like that do certain things when it comes to class stacking, etc. Basically, what is the difference between Blood Legion viability and the average progression guild viability, or the average player viability? And I think you had a pretty nice explanation for that, Melody. So I'll just let you answer that right away.
Okay. So when we're doing things, we do it the first week it's coming out usually. So we're usually undergeared. So for building a comp for Blood Legion, one of the things we have to take into consideration is how little healing we can possibly scrape by with, right? So something that comes into our decision making a lot is things like how much damage we can do, or like for example Ultraxion. For that fight, we 5 healed it for our first kill, or no, 4 healed it. Sorry, I think Vodka 3 healed it, though, if I remember correctly. And the reason was we used 2 Disc Priests, and we were smiting most of the time. They used like the bare minimum number of healers, but they had to use a lot of off-spec raid cooldowns in the last phase. So slightly different ways of doing it, but the point is the comps are really geared around how much damage we can get out. So we'll usually design like our comps around either how much damage we can get out, or if we need a specific cooldown. Like Shaw of Fear, this tier, we brought a Holy Priest, surprisingly, because we wanted to Divine him for the last phase. Because if you got a lot of healers with the huddle, Divine him was a good way to heal them through that.
Right.
So it could be just one simple ability that's all we care about. We don't care how much overall healing they do. We don't care about things like that generally. It just comes down to what we're going to be able to get away with the least number of healers for.
Right. And this is...
That's why Method also brought 2 Resto Druids to their first kill for Shot Fair.
Yeah, I won't speak for them. I know one of them is an officer, I'm pretty sure. I don't know how much they sit, but... and we don't always do what's exactly optimal either. Sometimes it's just, we know something will work, so we just keep going with it, even if we know there was something better that we could do, just because we don't want to relearn it,
Right. And, I mean, this essentially is the root of where we start seeing a lot of, well, this healer wasn't brought to this kill, so obviously that means the entire class is broken, and nobody can ever use this class again.
How silly.
We saw that a lot with Resto Shaman back in BWD, and tiers like that. And I find a lot of people look at this information and they just see what Blood Legion's doing, and they assume that it's because shamans are just a shitty spec. And it might not be because of that. It's, like you said, specific mechanics. Personally, I mean, actually, I'll let Storm kind of take this. Personally, we don't do that. We're a fairly progressed guild. However, we don't abuse things that way.
Yeah. We don't go for those kind of things. We just go with what we know works and who we're comfortable with doing the jobs we assign them.
Right. So, the moral of the story, essentially, is that just because Blood Legion does something one way doesn't mean that it's because a class can't work. And I feel like it's something that just needs to be repeated over and over again as time
More about
goes
the
on.
players than the classes.
Yes, and essentially bring the player, not the class, still works.
Yeah, something along those lines that I got asked a little while ago, why we didn't bring any Resto Druids I don't think we brought any for any of our progression kills, and the funny thing about that is our main Resto Druid is also really good at Boomkin, and Boomkins were pretty good this tier, so we didn't really have a main Resto Druid on all this expansion so far. So
Right.
it's even though I think Resto Druids were underpowered, it wasn't that's not why we didn't bring Resto Druids. It's just we didn't have one that we wanted to use.
Yeah, right. I guess I could ask Kat here if she has an opinion on the whole subject, because, if...
Guests from over the pond.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, if you couldn't tell from the accent. I think it's a lot better for high-end raiding guilds because we have the ability to have ults, and generally, you're forced into playing them more than anything else. So in that way, class stacking is easier because you don't have to sacrifice the good players. The good players just change class. They relog. It's not as big as a deal, if you get what I mean.
Right. But I will probably repeat this multiple times. Once again, it's stressed that just because a top-end guild does not bring a certain class, it's not because that class is broken. I mean, that very well might be the case, but chances are that's not at all.
It's usually boss specific. You learn a lot of
Exactly.
stuff on the PTR for it as well, so...
If we use 4 of them, they're probably broken.
Right.
Hang
Before
on.
I get to some of our other...
Shut up!
Oh, okay.
Someone asked in
That's
chat,
nice.
what class does Cat play?
I All right. Yes. Kat, what class do you play?
I play a Disc Priest main.
Yeah, disc priests. Anyways, so we have a bunch of questions, but I have my own one last question before we get into the other ones. And this can be addressed by either Maladi or Kat, whoever wants to go first. There's something that a lot of lower end guilds don't seem to do. And it's generally when it comes to healers and DPS. I find that personally we spend more time DPSing as healers than we do as healing in a lot of situations. I know sometimes I watch Storm just sit there and DPS the whole fight while dropping healing rain, and it's really depressing. So I guess the question would be, how do you value healer DPS, basically, in high-end raid settings? Like, what classes would you prefer, or, what classes are strong when it comes to that? Pretty shitty question, but it's interesting to me. You can go with Malady first.
Okay, so just ask yourself, like, how big a deal is, like, doing 5% more damage as DPS? I think if you ask any DPS if they could do 5% more damage, they'd pretty much always say, yeah, sign me up, right? So when you have downtime as a healer, I mean, this is a game of numbers, so you should be doing damage if you have time, right? So,
but it doesn't seem like a lot of people stress it enough, and I feel like it's a very important thing when it comes to progression. Like,
on progression, we stress it pretty strongly, but I mean, you can either do that or drop a healer if you need to, right? Like, there's only so many healers you can drop.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It seems like a very overlooked, important thing when it comes to healing and high-end progression, and I feel like it's a mentality more healers could embrace. And you see it whenever they add classes like monks and disc priests and whatnot. People feel more comfortable with DPSing, but it's something I feel like could be extended better to most of the healing classes.
I think it should be. I think it should try to be pretty balanced across them. I don't want that to be the reason that we bring one healer over another, but if anyone was watching our stream earlier when we were testing the boss, Affinity was doing like 60k DPS as a Mistweaver. That can make a pretty big difference. He was still doing like 80k HPS.
Yeah. Though, I assume that has more to do with the new Mistweaver changes than anything.
Oh yeah, it does.
So, now that I've kind of exhausted that idea, because I didn't think it through quite well, I will pass this along to Aiko, if he wants to ask some of the questions that we received prior to the show.
Hey.
And address them as he sees fit.
1 second. Okay. This question was asked by Riot earlier on the week in the thread on the US forums, under the healing forums. His question was, how do you see the synergy balance between healers in terms of classes, players themselves, and how does that affect the perceived balance of the healing classes? Malady, would you mind answering first?
Sure. I think, like, I'm not sure I see the difference. I was thinking about this earlier in the week, right, when I read the question on the thread, but like the perceived balance of the healing class seems to be in large part dependent on the synergy between the healers, like in terms of the classes at least. So I don't know if I could pick between them so much as, like, I think it's really important for your healers, the players, to have synergy, and I feel like the class balance needs to include like the synergy between different healers, like how Disc Priests and Restagers used to synergize really well because you could stop the damage and let people heal up and stuff, stuff like that plays into class balance, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Kat, which do you think is more important, the synergy between healers or the perceived balance? Because that was the original question. Which one is more important?
Well, it depends. I mean, in 10 it's a lot more important to have the healing classes for the fight, I'd say. I mean, Paragon show that amazingly well with their whole downgrading from 25 to 10. And I don't mean downgrading as a bad thing, that's just kind of how they put it. I'd say that in 10-man raiding, it's important to have that sort of absorbs class and then the healing class. Like, for example, a Holy Paladin and a Resto Druid or a Resto Shaman. But in 25-man, you generally have a mix. Like, you don't tend to see a 25-man stacked. And that's kind of where the synergy between classes comes into play, but more the synergy between players. So if you have someone who you know always has the tanks, then you feel more confident healing the raid, which is amazing as a disc priest.
Right. That's definitely something interesting. Another question we have from Riot as well was who actually has it rougher and which actually requires more skill? The healer in the average hard mode guild that isn't using the best comp and whose raiders frequently take a lot of avoidable damage, or the top 20 healer whose raiders don't take much unavoidable damage and is probably running an optimal comp? Maladi?
Depend pretty wildly, huh? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the good thing is when people aren't taking like avoidable damage, the damage tends to be very predictable, right? That makes it pretty easy. When that happens on a fight with lots of avoidable damage, that's where you see things like Paragon running 3 healers or something, you know, on like Heroic Rag, where, you know, so then it kind of gets, it's kind of like 10-man healing, you know, where it's just you and 1 or 2 other healers. There's a lot of individual responsibility there, but at the same time, it's all very predictable. So, I don't know, it's a tough question.
Yeah, I often had this view whenever I was in a less than optimal guild, that I felt like looking at, you know, logs between my guild and a better guild, I felt like I worked much harder, and it was a far more stressful healing environment than whenever I joined Simple Math, and we were far better about damage, and it's really difficult to determine, you know, which actually requires more skill, because they both like bring so many different.
Well, and then, you know, avoidable damage often means you die, you know? Like, at least on heroic rating, if you're taking avoidable damage, you're probably going to die, and then there's not much the healer can do, right? I will say, though, that if you know, people that care about parses, you're not going to parse in, like, a top guild. It's pretty hard, because nobody's taking damage, you're just sitting there.
I think we can all remember many nights me complaining about Russian monks, and not being able to beat them ever. Yeah. That's also something I kind of want to touch on. I'll ask Kat, how do you value the importance of logs, of, say, you know, when it comes to, as a healer, as a top-end, like, healer, how do you value healing logs?
I think they're an amazing tool. I think you can look at sort of like, you can balance it out. So you can see maybe if you're underperforming in a certain area, but you're overperforming in another, you can compare them. And also between fights, you can see why you died, who died more, what they died from or to, and you can work out from there whether you can, as Mehdi was looking at earlier, whether you can sort of lose a healer and bring another DPS, or whether you can use your downtime to DPS more and get more sort of, more healer DPS in there. I think, I would say that logs are an incredibly important part of it, and that's why a lot of guilds log even the PTR raids. It's not because we want to win the HPS or whatever, it's because we want to see where exactly in the fight you can do better and compare it to others.
I don't mean to cut in, but we had somebody make a comment that you sound like Hermione, Kat, so I just figured that you should know that.
Thank you. That was definitely necessary.
Oh my god.
That's adorable. There's actually an interesting one on here, and it's not so much a question, but a request for a discussion on healing cooldowns, such as how to coordinate raid cooldowns, which ones need to be considered, which ones should be left up to the individual healer. For example, a Holy Paladin has a bajillion CDs, and this question's from Pika Kuala. And he said, in his experience, the use of Devotion Aura will be discussed prior to the poll, but Divine Favor, Avenging Wrath is left up to the individual. Is this generally the case in high-end raiding? And also, who calls them out when and when for your raids? I'll throw this to Maladi, and then I'd actually like Storm to jump in after that.
Let's let Kat go first real quick.
Okay, Kat can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, like individual CDs are pretty obvious. They tend to be small throughput CDs, sort of Sacred Shield for priests, and yeah, as the question says, like Divine Favor, Avenging Wrath. They're things that generally you use on cooldown or you save for a burst, and you assume that your healers know where to use their tools. Things like Devotion Aura, Barrier, Trank, and even DPS cooldowns, they are either, well, in security at least, they're either called by the raid leader, which is our guildmaster Keba, or by the appointed healer, depending on the fight. So things where the tank can't really see what's going on, so Keba can't really call. It's a healer who's obviously staring at grid and their feet usually, and they can see whether we're falling behind or not. But you can also, before a fight, sometimes say, okay, on the first fear we'll do this, on the second we'll do that. So it's fight dependent as well, but generally either a main healer or a raid leader will call out the CDs for us.
Interesting. Malady?
Yeah, we don't usually plan things like Avenging Wrath and stuff like that. We do plan our spirit shells a lot of the time, like on, for example, Heroic Empress, the Disc Priests, we use our spirit shells on the second and fourth explosions every time. Amber Shaper, we plan which explosions we're going to let go off. We have spirit shells planned for those, stuff like that. And stuff like, we sometimes plan even like Ascendants and stuff for the Shamans. They can do a lot of healing with that. So we plan around those sometimes. Not usually some of them like Paladin throughput cooldowns, though. The harder cooldowns, though, like the straight damage reductions, those definitely tend to be planned.
Right. And what would you say is a good suggestion for someone who is not, say their guild isn't coordinating well when it comes to cooldowns? What would be something you'd tell that person to help them get better at it? Anyone can take that one. Storm, actually, maybe?
Well, it's important for whoever's calling the cooldowns to know what cooldowns you have available. I know in our guild, our raid leader is not very good about calling my cooldowns, so I'm usually I do them on my own, and it's usually like up to my own discretion, and I trust my own judgment, but it's not something we call, but we call other kinds of cooldowns, so making them known is really important, like saying you have these cooldowns to your raid leader at some point when you're discussing what you're going to do about cooldowns is probably the most important thing when it comes to managing cooldowns.
Right. And
ORA3 is a really great mod for that.
Which one?
ORA3.
Ah, yes.
I have an addendum to that question, actually. At what point do you all deem to use personal cooldowns in place of raid cooldown? Like, say, if you end up running out, like, do you have like a set order on personal cooldowns that you would hold for that if you'd need to, or is it just kind of what's up?
LOL, Disc Priest Pro.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Kat wants to tackle that one.
Sorry, could you repeat the last part of the question?
The question's basically, like, at what point do you sub in, or what point would you sub in a personal cooldown over a raid cooldown? Like, if you think, say, your paladin can pop wings in Divine Favor to be able to save a raid cooldown for later on in the fight whenever you know you're going to need it, or if you end up running out near the end of a fight during a heavy burst damage phase.
Instead of that, we normally ask raiders to use their personals. Like, well, instead of a big raid cooldown, if we don't have one, it wouldn't be a personal healer throughput cooldown. It would be more sort of everyone pop your CDs, and then we'll shield any particularly squishy classes. But that generally happens only sort of at the end of a boss on a Titan Rage. Eek. Shamans on Sulong, who can completely do the boss in one phase, which we haven't tried yet, but we will. That type of thing with Ascendants. If you knew that it was an OP ability.
That actually. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, that was not intended. That was broken on every front.
But it was so beautiful.
I may or may not have allowed a friend's guild to wipe all night trying to do it without, correct it. That was, yeah.
When did they fix that one?
They fixed it like last week, I believe.
Oh, damn, I missed that one, huh?
Yeah, honestly, I really wanted to do it.
Someone linked it on MMO Champion, so of course the devs got it.
Of course I got it.
I've been too lazy to do it, so...
The first
yeah.
day, what was it, Ancestral Healing, or whatever the one, the crit proc thing that heals like it's a smart heal or whatever, that was double dipping, so they fixed that like within minutes of us finding it, though.
I wonder how you guys missed the AG bug. I guess you weren't really looking to, AG
I have
on
no idea how we
a
missed
million pets. It was
When a boss is on farm, you don't really care.
Yeah. So given we have that actually, let's see. All right, we can cover this one as well before we go to our audience. What would you consider? No, that's not going to. What are the pros and cons of different healing mods / raid frame plus mouse overs? Essentially, what are the pros and cons of most mods? What does using, say, Grid or Voodoo give you over not using Grid or Voodoo for newer healers that might not understand that well? Kat?
My main problem with Voodoo is that it resets your key bindings randomly, which is always fun. That may have been during its younger years, but that's why I stopped using that one. I use Grid and mouse overs mostly because you can modify mouse overs as you please. If you decide one fight you want it to dispel focus and another one you want it to dispel target, then you can easily change that. But obviously, the newer healer might not have as much familiarity with macros, and that's where things like Clique come in handy, which is just you bind a spell to a key on your keyboard, and whenever you mouse over a target and press it, it casts it on that target. The only downsides to using those type of things is obviously PTR raids where they don't work, and again, if you ever like a new expansion, even for the more casual players, they can mess up a lot.
Yeah. Jordan, you have an opinion on it?
Honestly, I personally use the original Grid still because I've never had the add-on break. I use Grid and mouse over macros, just like Kat was saying, and always have since I started healing whenever I was thrown into it on Lich King progression. I really don't have anything else to add to that. I know a lot of the healing mods were notoriously bad about, especially Healbot and ICC. I don't know if they fixed it, but it was notoriously bad about not having Volithria, or whatever the name was. The dragon you had to heal, not popping up on your frames and stuff like that. So
I think they're having the same problem with Sulong now, so...
Yeah. So
I personally use Grid and mouse overs as well. An interesting thing, on our website, I will probably bug Vero for us to all share any good macros we use, if anyone would be interested in those. Do we have any questions from our viewers right now? We have two pretty awesome people answering questions. You might not get this chance again, so if you have anyone Any questions for a healer from Blood Legion or a healer from Security? Love them. Unless anyone from our cast has a question for either of them as well. Who knows? Going once? Nothing.
I can always throw out this little nugget I found online the other day, if you like.
Go for it.
It was looking at sort of psychology of players and why they choose tank, DPS, healer. And they said that whenever they played a healer, they always felt they had to apologize for their presence in a group because you can always work around the healing. And there's always going to be someone who can heal throughput better than you. And I think part of that is because people put too much emphasis on it in a way. Like, you always feel as though you have to say, oh, I'm doing more healing than you, or oh, I'm quicker on dispels than you. And DPS don't do that. They go, yeah, I'm top of meters. I'm like, accept it more.
In most LFRs, I have to admit that the only people who ever ask for the links for any type of meter add-on, recount, or SCADA is a DPS just so they can brag.
Right. Alright. We do have a few questions here. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to address this one to Maladi. Going back to Disc Priests, what should be the spirit cap, and what is the priority of stats, hard cap or soft cap? Yeah.
Alright, so if you look at my armory, I'm wearing way more spirit than I need to. It really doesn't make as big of a difference as people tend to think. I tend to go very conservative with it just because I'm on farm and don't really care, and I just don't ever want to run out of mana because I'm not paying attention half the time. So don't look too deep into that. But really on progression, I felt like 11k was a pretty good maximum for how much spirit I needed, and I definitely go mastery right now until 5.2 anyway. Then I'll reevaluate. I don't know of any real soft caps worth considering for Disc Priest though. Mana is just kind of subjective depending on your raid comp and what spells you're using really, and how consistently you can get Rapture.
And what would you say on the stat priority for Disc and coming up?
For coming up, I'll have to redo my math when I know if they're changing anything else. I don't usually redo things until a couple weeks before the patch goes live.
Right. Kat, same question?
At the moment on the PTR, it's looking like crit's going to be a big one, which most Disc Priests are going to hate. Most healers hate crit, to be fair, unless you're a shaman or maybe resto druids, but yeah.
Mistweavers.
Yeah. Mistweavers, I think it's more of a case of there's just really no incentive to use anything else right now.
You could make more globes that nobody uses.
Globes.
Hey, I run over the globes for affinity.
I run over the globes and like one tank, and that's it.
Are you the one single-handedly making Affinity a god tier monk, Maladi?
Yeah, I'm standing in fire and running over his orbs for him.
Yeah.
I won't do that for you.
Yeah, nobody will. I can't count how many times I've sat there in the middle of raid. Everyone's at half health, and there's like 30 orbs on the ground, and they're just not being used at all. And I'm just sitting here like, how the hell did we kill Heroic Shaw like this?
Well, I mean, when I was beta testing Mogashun Vaults as a Mistweaver monk, it was the same thing. And I know that the healing orbs are new, but you're still sitting there wanting to like literally just shout at people, run through the pretty green orbs.
Yeah, and they are adding something in the patch to make our orbs suck a little less. I believe they're reverting that whole change they had initially proposed, where they heal for a certain amount after they expire, right? Which should be interesting. Let's move on to another question. Cat.
I think your orbs are the new Lightwell, because at least you can glyph Lightwell to not have to be glyphed, or not have to be clicked to still heal.
Right. Yeah.
Shami, you're going super robot on us here.
Yeah, you definitely are. Yeah. Let's see. Next question. How has Mr. Pandaria been with the usage of alts on every fight? Kat? Have you guys had to use too many alts or switch around your comps a lot?
I mean, the big ones, we had to make some people go Disc Priest for Empress, so that we had 3 or maybe 4 for most of our kills, just because Spirit Shell's OP for that fight. And obviously Protector's Elite, most of the melee had to have a ranged ult geared up by then. Overall, I wouldn't say it's been, at least from our point of view, amazingly class dependent, but that's because we have a pretty good setup, I think, of main raiders. So, oh yeah, and we use tank off specs a lot, as in a lot, which I think is a really bad design flaw, especially for Shah, making Shah a 3-tank fight. The end boss of a tier of mostly like 2, sometimes 3 tanks, if you want to choose it in a particular way, was kind of, it wasn't very fair on the raiders, because it meant a DPS suddenly had to go tank, or, you know, people who don't really enjoy being being tank then have to learn it quite quickly.
Yeah, we had some fun experiments where I was forced to go Brewmaster for progression. And fun fact, I still haven't healed Heroic Amber Shaper. I don't know how to do it as a healer.
You heal things. It's not very interesting.
Look.
No, you smite the entire time.
Yep. Or if you want to choose meters, you Spirit Shell and melee just before he stomps.
Yeah.
That's way too much.
I will say it's a fun fight to tank, so I'm not too angry about it. Maladi,
I started getting holy for fights like that. It's for something.
Well, you know what I played for progression. I was on my monk for Mogu, and then my priest for Heart of Fear, and then my monk for part of Terrace. And you know, I switched around a lot. We did a lot of stuff with alts.
Yeah. You guys also have an obscene amount of alts, don't you?
Usually.
Yeah.
Alts really help at the beginning of a tier as well, because you can do multiple clears, which means the mains get more gear.
Let's see.
There was the Druid question earlier. I just lost it in chat, though.
Yeah, feel free to ask the next question, Echo.
Spokes the Druid asked, what do you think about the 4-piece for Resto Druids? I'm assuming that's the P15 4-piece Frozen.
What is the 4-piece
Do you
for
remember
Resto
what that
Druids?
is?
The 4-piece, I believe, is the increasing rejuve power. I could be mixing that up with the 2-piece, so hold on, let me see if I can go find it.
If anyone knows offhand to speed it up.
I'm looking too.
While he's looking that up, how do you all feel all the Resto Druid changes are actually going to do to balance them with other healers? Kat?
The general consensus is that Resto Druids won't be strong until they have enough spirit to spam that one spell on everybody in the raid and just rejuve blanket the whole raid, which appears to be what the 4-piece, we have now been informed, is the healing done by your rejuvenation increases by 6% each time it causes healing. Is there a cap on that? There definitely is a cap on that, right?
I think it's
There has to be.
per person. I
Yeah,
think
it's
each
per
person gets their
rejuve.
own buff.
But
Yeah,
still,
they appear to be.
I mean, you think about it, blanket the whole raid with rejuves, and they each, increase.
Well, they'll each scale up, yes. Each
They
one
lowered
will
the mana cost too, didn't they, for Rejuve?
Yeah,
By about
10%
9%.
mana cost,
Yeah.
or 9% or something like that?
It's almost
pretty
10.
good.
It's like 9-point-something%.
Hopefully it'll increase the number of people who play it.
Right?
Maybe I'll actually give him.
Let's see. All right, here's a fun one for Malady, because I know you guys were pushing for world firsts this tier, and I assume you're going to for the whole expansion. What would you say tends to hold up your progression the most?
Ooh.
Sleeping.
No, none of that.
Bugs?
Not allowed. It's really mental, I think. Like, I can talk about, I guess, like Will of the Emperor, when we lost to Method. like people have a really hard time bouncing back from losing world first. So I guess that's not really relevant when you're actually trying to get world first and what stops you from getting it. But afterwards, going for US first, we lost US first on Will of the Emperor to vodka, and I think in large part of it was because we just collapsed after losing the method.
Right. So it's basically kind of get yourselves in a rut whenever someone beats you, and
Yeah.
you kind of just play shittily for a little while, and then you...
Yeah, I feel like it always takes us like a day to really recover our composure after something like that. Like Spine was like that too when we lost to Kin Raiders on that.
Kat, what would you say holds up your progression most?
People dying to unnecessary things. In all honesty, I think one of the main differences between your average 25 man and your sort of slightly higher 25 man would be that the slightly higher one's willing to go back faster after a wipe and like learn from the experience. So I'd say that, well, I wouldn't say the skill is exactly the same, but I wouldn't say there was as much of a difference as people see it. I'd say that it's a lot more sort of like learning as you go and sort of the perspective of it.
Yeah. Personally,
and definitely determination.
Personally, with Storm and I's Guild, it's very funny how the difference between us and a guild like Blood Legion is. Like, what will hold up our progression the most will be just dumb, stupid mistakes that never get fixed. Like, personally, I am guilty of doing really dumb shit.
Only into everything.
I will roll... If there's an ability that can kill you in this game, I have rolled into it at least 10
Did you roll into
times.
water spouts? I don't remember.
I
Have you backpedaled off of a platform on Madness, like Infinity?
I have actually done that.
Twice
Yes.
in one night?
Not twice in one night. I did. I'm waiting for the blooper reel to come out, but we had one night where I got really pissed off because I got sad because I decided to play terribly. I died like 3 times in one heroic shot pull. Because I would roll into one thing and then I'd roll into another thing, or then I would forget that I should be inside the wall of light. And you know, it's little dumb errors like that that differentiate a guild like ours from a guild like Blood Legions. We have a lot more of those little errors that add up to tons and tons and tons and tons of wipe. So,
we actually have more of those than you'd think. Like, I mean, I made tons of mistakes today. I make tons of mistakes all the time.
Though I think the thing is you learn from them faster than we do.
Well, and the amount of preparation we put into it is a big part of it. Like, the stuff we do on PTR, like going into LFR and just practicing the mechanics when there's no raid testing going on, stuff like that. We put in a lot of hours.
Yeah. Definitely far more preparation than us, for example. Let's see, let's scroll. This is a fun one from Dragon User. How often does Affinity yell for people to run over orbs?
It's usually in a bind.
He'll yell at individual people.
No, he'll yell at me that nobody's running over orbs.
Well, here's a question.
I'd have to expect him to have...
Here's a question from chat. What is harder to overcome on fights that you're under geared? DPS, healing, or tanks?
Almost always DPS in our experience, but
Cat?
You normally have the tax down about like the 5th to 10th pull of the night, so you can work around the healing definitely on when you're under geared. You can always use more like shaman totems or devo auras, things like that. But the DPS tends to be what gets most people, which is where we go back to what we were saying earlier about healers DPSing and when it's not a burst and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, conventional wisdom is to gear the DPS and the tanks first. The healers in our guild never take loot over either one, ever, during progression. It just doesn't happen.
Alright.
I have a follow-up on that. How do you... I'm assuming you all have healers go off-spec just because you all drop healers so much. Do you all assume that certain healers have main spec DPS spec and healing off-spec, or with loot, or how do you all manage that?
We actually go the other way because we need the DPS to be optimally geared for DPS, you know? Like, if you have a healer switch to DPS, they're not going to do as much damage. So we sometimes have hybrids that are DPS go healing to fill in for something if we need, but we almost never have a healer go DPS. There's exceptions where a certain healer might have a really geared DPS alt they might jump on, and like I told you guys earlier, our Resto Druid is Acral, and he really hasn't played Resto Druid in like 2 tiers now because he's been playing Boomkin.
Yeah, and I feel kind of bad because this seems to be a very common occurrence. Boomkins are just so good that almost every Resto Druid in any top guild is now a Boomkin, almost at all times. I know it's that way for our Resto Druid.
I have a counterexample.
Oh.
Ald was a Boomkin and he was made to go Resto Druid. He's the officer in Method.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true. But I mean, I don't know. Like I said, just Moonkins everywhere. That's my experience here in the US. I don't know if it's different over across the pond.
No, we just haven't been... personally, from security's point of view, we haven't been able to get a Resto Druid who's willing to raid as a Resto Druid.
Really? We can't find any healers most of the time. Mostly Shaman. Shaman don't exist. They're not real.
We finally got one just as the end of the tier approached. So next tier we're sorted, guys. for the OP 4-piece.
Yeah, so do we have any other questions? Because I believe our time may be running short with both Malady and Kat. Anything from us or our guests?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for more people to log on PTR, then I'll probably bounce, but there's only like 7 people online, so...
Yeah. I definitely tried to log on to the PTR to find you, and even people I know tend to ignore me, so it's definitely depressing.
Goes mad at you for not responding to her text. Her text.
Oh boy. Let's see. Do you guys cheer on a kill, or is it more like a tennis match?
That depends on the kill.
Depends on the kill, yeah. I won't lie. Our shot of Fear kill was very lackluster to me. I've heard.
What? We did a lot of screaming.
For me, there was no screaming. There was like, okay, now I can go to bed.
I felt like it was a sigh of relief on Shaw.
Because it's such a long fight.
Well, I'm comparing it to other kills. Like, what was it? Too long? I think we were just like, yay, the fight's over. And we just didn't
and then
care.
there was like, wait, the boss is dead. Okay. Yeah, this tier, honestly, I haven't really felt that rush that much.
I felt on Spirit Kings.
Spirit Kings and Vizier, those were the two outliers for us where there was definitely nerd screams.
Empress.
Yeah.
I fell
Definitely
asleep on Empress.
I'm pretty sure we got to Empress after the 10% nerf, so I wouldn't know. Aiko, Vero, and any of you guys have a question to ask or something to present for interesting conversation?
We were just asked again what our favorite class to heal on is. And I think we all like main our favorite healing class. Or am I just assuming that?
Well, I was forced into playing Shaman this tier, so because I originally came from playing a Disc Priest and absolutely loved it.
So, okay, well, what's everybody's favorite
you
healing
go,
class with Cat and however you Malady?
Malady, yeah. What are your favorite healing classes?
Well, I'm a priest normally by choice.
Is
but
it your favorite?
I prefer Holy, but I haven't gotten to play that in a long time.
You try to make
11.
your kill officer let you go holy every fight.
Yeah, we have a priest who likes being holy all the time, even though we'd rather him be disc half the time. It's very.
Don't worry, next patch it'll be fine. Holy will be buffed and Disc will be nerfed and...
We'll be smiting.
I know, right?
Okay, actually, this is a good question. I'll give this to Maladi first. Which fights do you feel are the more? Which fights do you feel are the most annoying for healers, present and past?
By far, right now anyway, Amber Shaper. Why? Because we never get picked. So the one time you do get picked, like once every 2 months or whatever, it's like, oh crap, I haven't done this in 2 months.
Press like 2 buttons. It's so easy.
I have to say, we're going past or present for healing fights. I hated whichever the name of the ping pong boss was in Dragon Soul.
Xanax.
Oh,
But
Xanax.
especially when you had to cleanse the debuff off, because I was the only healer in my raid group that apparently knew how to cleanse.
You guys dispelled the debuff.
When we're first
Wasn't a big
running
deal.
it, when we're first doing it, and you're under geared, yeah.
Yes.
I love dispelling on Spine. I think I'm the only healer in the world
Oh,
who
I like
enjoys that.
dispelling on Spine. That was the only thing I liked doing. I hated the
Same!
fight.
The fight was horrible, but
Well,
the dispelling was like...
I would,
What's going on?
I would tell Affinity that I was dispelling and that he couldn't.
On this, I was
Kat, do you have a particular annoying fight, past or present, that you think is the just shittiest for healers?
As a disc priest, yes, Leishi, because you can't time Spirit Shell. And you have to tank heal. Well, not tank heal, but heal the debuff, and it's... Single target healing is not Disc's forte right now. I'll tell you my favourite fight is. That's more interesting. My favourite fight's probably Empress.
I like Empress.
You would like Empress Storm. You would.
I actually
Because they don't let you die. They let me die.
Wait,
so
what?
I'll get
Wait, let you die.
Oh, bullshit. Let's not even get into that. Okay.
To answer the question, my least favorite fight to heal presently is Shafir, because I don't do anything the entire fight, because there's nothing to fucking heal.
I will say this about Shadow Fury. I've bitched about it a ton. It's very boring. For like the first 18 minutes of the fight, there's just nothing to heal. And then just like in the last 10% of the boss's health, all of a sudden, it's just everything to heal. It's probably one of the most ridiculously designed fights I've ever seen. It's... yeah. Vero, we have a question from Twitter.
Yeah. So Pebble asked, how do you feel healing changes someone's perspective on a raid? If you didn't start as a healer, how did it change your own?
Well, that's actually a really good question. Malady?
Can you repeat that real quick? Sorry.
So people know Skype's gonna go weird.
It was,
Stream's gonna go weird.
yeah,
for-
how do you feel healing changes your perspective? If you didn't start as a healer, how did it change your perspective on raiding?
I've healed almost my entire WoW career, so I don't know.
Does it make you feel like jaded towards raiding or, anything fun like that? No.
I'm still raiding.
True. Kat, you?
I started as a healer. My priest was the first class I leveled. And yeah, I can't play DPS. I've tried, but I find it really boring, and then I find myself trying to off-heal on feral druids and things, and I get told off. I'd say that healing gives you a lot more insight into where's bad to stand, rather than maybe DPS is more sort of how long can I stand in the bad thing. But, yeah, and I don't know, I feel like you get a lot more control over the encounter as a healer.
I feel like you can abuse mechanics more. Like, you just run through the fire sometimes because, you'll just fucking heal yourself. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I think we're all guilty of that as healers.
Yeah.
Especially on fights where we feel like padding the meters a little bit, maybe.
I feel disconnected from the raid when I'm not healing. Like, I feel like completely not in control of anything. Just like, kind of like a passenger on a speeding train or something, Just don't crash, please.
Yeah, I know one of my personal things is like, anytime I DPS, I'm not thinking of it as a DPS. I'm thinking of the fight as like a healer, so I'm not focusing on what I'm doing. I'm focusing on, holy shit, that guy's about to die and nobody's healing him. I need to heal him right now. And I can't because I'm DPSing. And I find... Go ahead.
I know that the few times I actually DPS, I go about it with just screw the raid, I'm going to DPS mentality, because I know if I actually pay attention to the raid, I'm just going to be like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Yeah.
On my DPS tunes, I actually turn raid frames completely off because otherwise I focus way too much on them. I actually came from a hunter though, so I mean, outside of having a focus target for misdirection, I never really needed one, except for to see aggro. So I kind of got used to the point from where I played a hunter in T11 that I abused distracting shot way too much because of bad tanks and looking for dungeon, because I had nobody to gear up with in my guild, because my guild was bad in T11. So
add practical to the podcast, but he's not answering. There he is.
Hi.
Oh, interesting.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Everybody,
Greetings.
welcome Practical.
Practical is the Healer Forum's resident MVP and total hunk.
Roughly.
Roughly.
I'm vaguely hunkish,
Vaguely.
as hunk as a WoW player can get. I mean, yes. Hi, my name's Michael, also known as Practical, and I'm pretty familiar with all of you guys, although I don't think I've been introduced to everyone. But that's okay because I've watched you guys pretty yearly. Pretty creepy, actually.
Creepy.
It's kind of why I got married. You know what I mean? It's how I got married, actually.
Oh, you just talked to your wife?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I mean, isn't that the way that it's supposed to?
Um,
No? Right, so what are we talking about?
Currently, I'm just going to pose. We're probably going to be cutting loose Melody and Kat soon, so last minute questions before we tell them goodbye and start having fun with Practical instead.
Oh my god, it's Malady. Can you tie my chest? I don't know how to really... Hi.
Hi.
Actually, something I would like to bring up. Malady, I'd like to get you back on another time, when we have more time to talk just about some of the fun balance things we've discussed in the past.
Oh god.
Theory like that.
Oh, yeah.
That would be an interesting episode to do. I think
Okay, well, I gotta run testing, and I need to... Yeah, so I will talk to you guys later.
It was good to have you on, man.
thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Coming.
I'll see you guys later.
Later.
Thanks. See ya.
Kat, are you going to head out soon?
I should really go as well. But it was lovely to talk to you guys. And have
Feel
fun.
free to.
Bye, Kat.
come
Thank
back.
you.
See you around.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, 2 down. Alright. And now I'm out of ideas. No,
Did you get... I'm pretty sure you already went through all the questions that were asked.
yeah, we went through
We
most
did.
of them.
Because I know about, 2 minutes ago, someone asked something about going from like a DPS class to a healing class.
Mhm.
And what was the question exactly? If anyone remembers that.
I think Vero had that one. She wants to ask you that again, because you had an answer for that.
I can pull it back up if you just give me a second.
You know, I don't want to be that guy to
Just
go back and answer.
question.
Yeah, it's a necro, a
Shame
3-minute-year-old
on you.
question.
Necro.
Okay, it's from Pebble, and it says, how do you feel healing changes someone's perspective on a raid? If you didn't start as a healer, how did it change your own?
I started as a mage from Burning Crusade, and I stepped into Paladin during the end of Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King. I played both, but the reality of it is that when you're playing a DPS class, you have a terrible tendency to sort of play very binarily, which is like A to B, or at least that's how Mage was. And when you go from that sort of play style to all you care about is doing the highest amount of damage, and then you move towards, I need to keep this raid alive. It's a pretty shocking experience. It's the best way that I can put it, because you you have to account for everyone, and you have to have so much spatial awareness about everything that it sort of makes the game really fresh and new all over again. And for perspective, I stopped playing Mage or any type of DPS in Wrath of the Lich King, and I have never looked back since. So
I mean, I have to agree with that. I have to agree with that. Going from a hunter to a healing perspective, you just get hype. I just tend to get hyper aware when I'm healing over if I happen to be DPSing.
Right.
yeah, I mean,
It's not only do I have to stay out of shit, but I gotta watch out and make sure everybody else is staying out of shit, so I know who to call out if they stand in it.
well, the reality of it is that, I mean, and I don't mean to say this, and I'm pretty sure there's people who main DPS or play DPS more than they heal. They might be listening in on this, I don't know, but I guess like when you're a healer, when you're a DPS, it's you against the fight or the raid that you're playing. It's never anything more than that. You don't have to care about anyone else. But as a healer, you're sort of fighting against your own raid, which fight is the wrong word for it, but you're playing with your raid literally because you have to take care of them as well. And then as well as pay attention to fight mechanics and perform as well as other people do. And so there's kind of like a whole different perspective and space when you're playing healer, which it's pretty obvious, in my opinion.
I think that might depend on the DPS that you are too, because I mean, like Reds right now have a lot of raid utility that they can bring.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a pretty good point. Specifically, Retribution or even Druid to some degree, depending on what you're doing. You kind of really do have to be aware. I know that for healer chat, we had our rep Paladin. He liked playing like that Retribution attacking support type of thing. So he enjoyed a lot throwing out Hand of Sacrifices and blessing of protections and stuff like that. But for the most part, I consider it to be a very big culture shock when you're going from DPS to healing. It's nowhere the same at all.
Yeah. Right, we're gonna move on to another question.
Do we have another question?
How do you guys feel about the change to Dispel?
God, I hate the 8-second cooldown.
For me, personally, I loved the change to Dispel. It was a little hard to cope with at first, but it really puts more responsibility on every healer, because the way you do usually handle it is 1 second.
Do 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 do.
Sorry about that. Anyways, the way you usually handle it is you'd have one person, and that person would handle everything. And I didn't feel like that was. I felt like it really negated, the idea of having spells in the game. But then they still have things like Mass Dispel, and I don't even know.
There's only
Anyone
one
else?
class with a Mass Dispel.
Coming from a paladin, like dispelling wasn't even something. I mean, I did it a lot, but I really didn't feel the difference of it in PvE. And some of you guys might already know, as long as rating is balanced around each healer being able to dispel once every 8 seconds or so, I don't mind it at all. I don't PvP very much, so that's probably a reason why I don't feel it as much as other people do. But I haven't come across a problem where I'm just like, oh god damn it, I need to be dispelling more than once every 8 seconds.
We have another question from the chat asking, what keeps us rating after all these years? So I think most of us have been rating for 2+ years. I don't know. I've been rating since vanilla.
I've been rating for like 8 years now.
Yeah, since vanilla. Damn,
Yeah.
a long time.
I will attribute it partially to the fact that I have problems and I have a very addictive personality, and I just love this game. No, but for me, rating is an interesting form of competition for me. It's fun, and you can do it at like a very personal level with just a group of friends, while also turning it into like, oh, we gotta beat these guys. And It's very yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's just a competition, even if it feels like you're just competing against friends or against developers by beating things that they're creating. But I have to think that what keeps me raiding mostly would have to be just being able to spend time with friends.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes down to it, I raid because I have fun raiding. If I wasn't having fun raiding, I would.
Nice picture, practical.
You know?
What'd you say?
Nice picture.
I can't understand a word you just said. You sound like, I feel like you're talking through a potato.
I'm sick!
Oh, I'm sorry. Ooh. Okay,
He does
right.
have the third A's right now.
So, I guess the reason for me was Blizzard designs really good fights, and for everything that it's worth, I strongly believe that I won't find these types of mechanics or this type of experience in many other video games. But what encompasses that is, I guess, like the friends that you make. And I would not raid or even like raiding very much if I didn't like the people that I was raiding with. I like healer chat a lot, and if it really wasn't for the friends that I made there, I don't think that I would enjoy raiding as much. But I think that we all do it, I guess, on a microscopic level, simply because each and every one of us like the blistering challenge that it comes with if you raid hardcore. I know that Rain has raided hardcore, and I know that I have. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's horrible, but it is so gratifying when you do it. And it's the best way that I can put it is like Warcraft and World of Warcraft, and seeing other people raid is my equivalent to football, because I don't watch football, and I'm not really big into sports. So for me, the reason why I keep coming back to it is because it's more than just raiding. You know, it's more than just playing a game. It's a thing that you do with friends, and
Yeah.
it's just awesome. It's fun.
I love watching other people raid too when they on Twitch or whatever. On any given night, we can have 2 or 3 IRC healers streaming a raid, and even if I'm not, watching it directly the entire time, I really like tabbing over and seeing what they're doing. I know I've watched Miss raid a couple of times.
Storm, why do you keep raiding after all of these years?
To be honest, my guild. Like, I enjoy raiding with the people who are in my guild, and if I ever had to leave my guild, I would probably quit raiding.
Yeah, I will say I've had more fun in this guild than I have my entire 8 years playing WoW. Like, it's pretty ridiculous.
What about you, Joe? Why do you raid? Lauren? She's probably not even listening.
What?
Why do you raid?
Because I enjoy it immensely, obviously, since I'm doing it on 3 different servers.
So,
Shut up.
Before we end, are there any more questions, or we can tell some stories of personal experiences.
I posted one in Skype chat. It was pertaining to not necessarily healing, but the dev water cooler that came out, I think, like a week ago. And I was wanting to know how you all, like everybody else, feels about the idea of using clever mechanics and how they, or creative use of mechanics, aka Ring of Frost and Heroic Will of the Emperor, versus doing the fight is how it's intended.
The way that he explained it really well. He said that, like, if a player does something that explicitly states, like, Spell Steal says it's going to do this because they took it from the troll from Garajal and then they used it, that is a clever use of mechanics. I think that people know that it's wrong, like, but they're not. It's never going to stop hardcore raiders or for people who want to push to not exploit them, but to use those tools. And to be honest, if Blizzard's okay with it and they're like, hey, this is sort of like a loophole and they took advantage of it, and if it wasn't an exploit, then I'm all right with it. But Garajal being stuck at the door, that's an exploit. You know, that's not cool.
I feel like we need to call out Tim on this
Yeah,
situation.
but spell stealing the buff from one of the mage trolls before Garajal fight, that's cool because you know whoever caught that was obviously bored enough or stressed out enough to pay attention to it that they really wanted to take advantage of it. But the latter is just
personally, I'm not a fan. I understand why goats do it, but when I see something happening and it begins to trivialize a fight in any way, if it gives you something that the devs clearly didn't intend, that wasn't a part of the fight, I know that it's going to get fixed. Because it always gets fixed. And I will always discourage the use of creative mechanics because I feel like if you're using that to just blast by in progression, you cripple your raid by not learning it properly.
You're right.
You rely on something that isn't going to be there forever, and then you have to relearn the fight. For example, I know of a particular guild that had to kind of somewhat relearn Will of the Emperor because he hadn't killed it since the Ring of Frost nerf. So I feel like you waste time if you cheapen the fight that way, yeah. Because you'll have to learn it the right way eventually.
How do you feel about the what was it, heroic Amber Shaper with the construct debuff?
That, on the other hand, I liked that. I thought that was awesome. I wanted to do it personally because it was actually using like the boss's mechanics. It was intentionally not pushing him over and just stacking the debuff. That, to me, was ridiculously awesome. They're probably just trying to fix the pictures to get them in the right spot since we had 2 people leave. That's for asking.
Fix pictures, but I kind of gave up.
So
there's no point since we only have like 15 minutes left.
Right. This was also asked in chat. How does your significant other deal with your raiding addiction?
I raid with my significant other.
Oh, my personal thing is I don't have one.
Same.
Oh. Am I allowed to talk like as a married guy?
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, Papa Practical, old man.
Am I allowed to do that? Right.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't think you'll find one woman who doesn't play WoW who is going to be okay with someone who, I guess, like works a full-time job and then goes home to raid for 4 hours a day. And furthermore, looking back on it, I don't think it's a good idea. I'm just saying, if I will say that my wife took a long it took a long time for her to get accustomed to. I was like, hey, I'm socially awkward in real life. This is why I play video games with people on hours at a time. It's really fun. It kind of got her. She had to kind of get used to the idea that it was more than just playing a video game, because that's where the problem is, isn't it? A lot of people, your significant other doesn't understand that what you're doing is playing with more than just yourself, that what you're doing is exercising a whole bunch of things mentally, psychologically, and just you're exhausting so many different things at your exposure that they don't understand that it's more than just, I guess, playing a game.
Because WoW has developed into this. I mean, I can go out on a limb and say WoW has turned into the social media giant almost. It's more interactive than talking to someone on Facebook because you're doing something with that person.
And not only that,
going towards a goal.
It started out that you're only friends with people on your server, and half the time they were people that were only in your guild. Whereas now, with the introduction to the BattleNet system and Lich King, I have almost pretty much everybody in this call right now on BattleNet, so I can talk to all of you even in-game. Even though most of you are Horde or you're on different servers or whatnot. So, and then you had the introduction to the looking for dungeon system, looking for raid. So even if you're not playing with friends on your server, you can still queue up, do dungeons with them and all that. And then you get the cross-realm zoning, which it's the same thing. You can do quests with friends from other servers.
Right.
And I mean, it's just something I feel like a lot of people outside of the gaming community just won't understand, no matter how much you try to explain it to them. Because I mean, okay, I'll say I raid 25 hours a week right now, and when I'm not raiding, I'm either studying for school or playing WoW. It's very difficult to explain to someone, hey, these 25 pre-scheduled hours of my life do not belong to anyone else for, those periods of time, because I have a commitment to these 24 people. Right. And I've had fights with exes over it before. And that's...
Well, like I said, I think anybody who has a significant other that plays WoW or has played it and understands the raiding schedule is completely, just utterly lucky. Like, I'm lucky enough that I actually raid with my boyfriend, so if I'm sitting there and if I'm not raiding with the guild that we're in together, he completely understands.
Yeah. But now that we've completely deviated from the original topic,
well, we have 13
I mean, we
minutes
kind of got the hardcore thing out of the way, but I have something I need to write up on sometime.
Any other questions from chat, or while we're looking for questions, going back to talking about past raids and all that, right after they introduced cross-realm raiding, I was doing Dragon Soul with my guild, and we were down a DPS, and my co-healer wanted the DPS, so we were like, fine, so we brought Vero in. And I have to say, she was, I think you were a Disc Priest at the time. I don't remember. But my computer completely, just stopped working and just froze up and everything. And I managed to get back into the game. This is on, the third platform of the Madness fight. And she managed to keep everybody alive on the third platform by herself. So.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting to see how the game has evolved that way. Actually, while we still have a solid amount of people listening, I want to throw this out here. I'm sure nobody else would be opposed to it. If you have anything that you would specifically want us to talk about in a future episode, you can tweet it at Podcast, or you could leave a comment on YouTube, or do anything else.
Or you can email us at gmail.com.
It would definitely help to get a feel for what people want to hear exactly.
Also, you guys want
and it would help you prepare a lot better.
If you guys want this to be a weekly podcast instead of every 2 weeks, you got to let us know. Because currently we're doing this every 2 weeks, but if there's a demand for it every week,
we can try to step that up. And we will probably move our broadcast time back a little bit so we could have Practical on regularly, since he gets off of work when the podcast actually starts. Which is why I didn't answer your call, sir, because we were already in the middle of this.
I had a feeling.
So we did get a question, and I'm going to actually direct this at Storm, because I still have not done challenge mode 6.
Yeah, I can answer that.
What is the difference between challenge mode healing and regular healing? Well, it's harder, but do you have to watch mana more, or etc.?
Okay, so when you're doing challenge modes, it depends on what you're shooting for. When I did them, my group was shooting for all gold. So any time we could save was priceless. And one of the things I learned while doing challenge modes was that I couldn't be literal with my cooldowns. If I was literal with my cooldowns and we died, that was just a bunch of time we wasted, and we had to restart. And it was just better for me to use the cooldowns and to just get through whatever the hell we were doing than it was to say, oh, I might need this later. later. Like, you have a very limited time frame in challenge modes. Like with gold, you have anywhere between like about 12 and 20 minutes for most challenge modes. So you can't afford to sit on your cooldowns. It's better to use them earlier than it is to sit on them. The other thing is that you have to take advantage of any free time you had. Like, I know that whenever I got a chance to drink, I would take that chance because mana was a commodity that if I had that excess of mana, we could do things faster.
Crystallized Amber.
I didn't use that, actually,
Why? It's so good.
because I
Arrested
am lazy.
Shaman.
It sort of depends on what class you're doing a challenge mode as to. Disc doesn't have too much issue with mana. I mean, there are times where you're sort of strapped for it, but I mean, Rapture is Rapture. I mean, maybe as I go into more of the fights, it'll come up more, but it hasn't been too bad so far.
Right. Huh?
Any other
Yeah.
questions?
And thank you for any of you first joining in. This is actually our second podcast, so we are still getting the hang of this, which is why we are asking for your input. What do you want to hear? What specifically you want to hear? More questions. It helps us all get ready because we spend a lot of time being like, hey, maybe we should talk about this. Hey, we should talk about this. And then like the day before the podcast, we're like, okay, we're doing this. And we just kind of go into it.
Right. Anybody who wants to talk to us normally at any time, we have a healer chat. Vera will link. IRC. We normally sit in there, so if you guys want to come up, talk to us, ask questions in there, just have some fun in there, you're welcome to join us. I don't know. We'll probably cover 5.2 changes next episode, just because we really do want to touch base on those when we get a chance. But we didn't really want to do that too much tonight, just because we wanted to cover hardcore progression while we had Kat and Maladi.
Yeah. In a future episode, I will probably be able to get Maladi back on, and there are some really interesting ideas we've come up between us, and it's mostly his ideas and me trying to elaborate on them, and we've ironed out some pretty cool stuff. So there's a lot of just theory crafting I'd like to just kind of throw out there for anyone who wants to hear it. My thoughts on monk classes, my thoughts on shaman.
Just don't get him started talking on that. He can go for like a day straight.
Miss is coming out with his own podcast, the Miss Show. It's going to be 5 hours a night of just him talking.
Would like to add that at some point we do want to do a PvP podcast. We don't have anybody who's in high-end PvP though, so
if any of you guys
you're
are
interested,
PvP and you want to come on, guest host the show or whatnot, I think we have a guest contact us, Pharaoh.
I will let you guys know. I will actually do some research.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna run in and
find someone.
Probably gonna do some.
I know people that I can add on my server that are high-end PvPers.
So be looking forward to a PvP episode sometime.
We also have a Confessions of a WoW Healer episode coming up, which is just going to be some personal experiences, both good and bad, on our behalf. Some reasons why we initiate kicks, some dungeons that we've had. It's pretty much just the things you don't want to hear in Pug's thread live.
And I will definitely say I have a lot of guilty healer stories personally. Because as good as I claim to be, I am probably
he's still human, so he's still.
I had a fun night on Heroic Fang progression. Wiped the raid 4 times. Ghost Wolf again to raid with Arcane Resonance.
Well, I
save those stories.
I have to hate that when you go into an LFR, and it's the people who are the worst are the ones that get the gear.
Alright, so I believe that is coming. That we're coming to an end here soon.
Please follow us on Twitter at Podcast.
And I do promise you we will be more organized before this is done with.
Like you said, it's only the second episode. You can also
User
find
interaction is huge for this.
You can also find our personal Twitters on there, so if you want to ask us questions directly instead of as a broad topic, you can follow people, our personal Twitters that are in there. We have to add practicals to the list, but...
I'm sorry?
To our Twitter list, under the Twitter, on the Twitter header for the podcast Twitter, we have all of our personal ones, so we'll have to add you.
Oh, okay, cool. And we're starting at, 7 next week?
Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
let us
probably
know
it.
if you guys
If
want...
not, you can always come in late.
Right.
Well,
All right, yep.
7's fine, but people need to let us know if they want this to be a weekly thing or a bi-weekly thing or every 2-weekly thing.
Yeah, it would definitely be useful because my schedule is very hectic right now.
Yeah, so just let us know. And I think that's about it. So thanks for
And
tuning
that
in.
concludes our episode.
Thanks
for
for
tuning
turning
in.
me on.
Thanks for
Bye.
tuning in,
Later.
guys.
Bye. You guys can message me on Skype
Bye, guys.
because I'm going to go to a Magic the Gathering tournament because Gate Crash is coming out tonight, and I need to take advantage of that because Magic the Gathering.
Okay, well, before we
is-
go... Hold on, before we go. Let's see if this last person who just tuned in has any questions. Because I feel bad not asking.
Oh yeah, we can do that. Last
Wait,
second
what?
question
Last
from
second questions
Ju
from
or
Ju.
anyone.
Going once.
Going once.
Going
twice.
twice. Hopefully.
And we
Central
are-
Time, we start normally anytime between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern, so... Is that an
Essentially,
hour
if we
behind
move it back
us?
an hour, we will be starting at 6 CST,
Yeah, probably.
and otherwise it's 5 CST.
But you can find us on YouTube. You can watch it here when we're done streaming live, and it's normally 2 or 3 days after the podcast goes out live. You can also find us on iTunes, which is really cool. So,
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
yeah, we're on iTunes under the podcast list. I'm actually subscribed to my own, the podcast I'm on via my iPod. So,
But yes, we are done for tonight.
Okay.
all right.
So
Bye, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you either next week or the week after. So tweet us questions, email us. We'll have threads on the healing forums. Join us in the healing chats. Maybe at some point we'll make a Facebook page.
okay, they got it. Let's do this.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.